A man inside a box, holes drilled for air, a jet leaving Japan. He is 65 years old, chairman of Nissan, chairman and chief executive of Renault, head of the Renault Nissan Mitsubishi Alliance, 3 companies, 470,000 employees, 122 plants across the world. He holds 3 citizenships and has been on the cover of every business magazine that matters. And on this night, in a city he is forbidden to leave, he is folded into a black case built for stage audio equipment, wheeled across a tarmac in Osaka, and lifted into the cargo hold of a jet bound for Istanbul. 24-hour cameras watch his Tokyo residence. He is forbidden from speaking to his own wife. He is out on bail of 1.5 billion yen, roughly 14 million US dollars. None of it matters. By the time anyone realizes he is missing, Carlos Ghosn is in Beirut. Behind him, 13 months of detention and rearrest, 4 criminal charges, a Japanese conviction rate of 99%, and a company that has spent more than a year tearing down the man who built it. In front of him, in Beirut, a microphone, a warning, a claim. The claim was that Nissan, without him, would collapse. Hold that. We will get to whether the numbers proved him right. To understand the man in that box, you have to understand what he was before. In 1999, Nissan was finished. The net loss that fiscal year was roughly 684 billion yen, the worst in the company's history. More debt than equity. Plants running at half capacity. Renault bought a controlling stake and sent in a Brazilian-born Lebanese-French executive nobody in Japan knew. The Japanese press named him within months the cost killer. He closed plants, cut 21,000 jobs, and broke the Keiretsu, the web of cross-shareholdings binding Japanese industry. He set public deadlines and said he would resign if he missed them, and did not. The Nissan revival plan returned the company to profit inside 2 years and became one of the most studied turnarounds in industrial history. Then he kept building. In 2016, he brought Mitsubishi into the alliance. By 2017, the group sold 10.6 million vehicles a year across 122 plants on the work of 470,000 people. Therefore, he had what every powerful executive eventually acquires: enemies inside his own company. What investigators later identified in Tokyo did not begin with prosecutors. It began with a whistleblower inside Nissan and an internal investigation ordered by Ghosn's own hand-picked successor. Hiroto Saikawa had spent 42 years at Nissan. Joined out of university, never worked anywhere else, Ghosn made him co-chief executive in 2016, then chief executive in April 2017, mentor and protege. And then, according to court testimony later given at the trial of Greg Kelly, 3 senior Nissan executives admitted under oath what had happened behind the scenes. Hitoshi Kawaguchi, head of government affairs; Hari Nada, senior vice president of legal; Hidetoshi Imazu, a statutory auditor. The 3 of them, by their own account in open court, got together, investigated what they believed was wrongdoing inside the company, and went directly to the Tokyo prosecutors. This is reported in Collision Course, the investigation by Hans Greimel and William Sposato, whose authors attended most of the 60-plus Kelly trial sessions. That admission, made in open court, is the spine of the story. It does not prove a coup. It proves coordination. On the morning of November 19, 2018, Carlos Ghosn's private jet touched down at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. Prosecutors were already on the tarmac. He was arrested before he stepped down the air stairs, driven to the Kosuge detention center, and charged with underreporting his compensation to Japanese regulators by tens of millions of dollars. The same morning in Yokohama, Saikawa stood at a press conference and announced the chairman would be removed. A 42-year veteran turning on the man who had appointed him. Ghosn has maintained his innocence since that day. The charges have never been tested at trial. Everything that follows is what prosecutors alleged and what Ghosn alleges back. Then came a mechanism that international critics and Ghosn himself call hostage justice. The channel takes no position on the term. It is used here as critics and the defendant have used it. Here is how it works, because the mechanism is the story. Each arrest gives prosecutors roughly 20 days to interrogate a suspect without a defense lawyer present. At the end of the 20 days, They can file a new arrest on a new charge and the clock resets. Another 20 days. This is what happened to Carlos Ghosn. The first arrest, November 19th, was for underreporting pay. As bail neared, prosecutors filed a second. December 21st, alleging that back in 2008 he had shifted a personal investment loss of roughly $16.6 million onto Nissan's books. 2 days later, the court extended his detention through New Year's Day. He spent Christmas and New Year's Eve in a cell at Kosuge. He was released on March 6, 2019, after 108 days on 1 billion yen, about $8.9 million. The image that flashed around the world was the most powerful man in the global auto industry walking out of a Tokyo detention center in a workman's cap, a surgical mask, and construction overalls. A disguise that did not work. The networks ran it on a loop. Less than a month later, on April 4th, prosecutors rearrested him a fourth time. Aggravated breach of trust tied to roughly $15 million in Nissan funds routed through a distributor in Oman, about $5 million of it allegedly to personal use. Ghosn called it outrageous and arbitrary. He posted bail again, another 500 million yen on top of the billion, $1.5 billion total. The conditions tightened, round-the-clock surveillance, and a new one added at the prosecutor's request. He was banned from seeing his wife. 99% of Japanese criminal trials end in conviction. That was the number Carlos Ghosn was looking at. He concluded, in his own words, that he could not get a fair trial. What he did next had never been done by anyone of his stature. On December 29, 2019, Carlos Ghosn walked out of his surveilled residence alone. He met two American citizens, Michael Taylor, a former U.S. Special Forces Green Beret, and his son Peter. They boarded a bullet train to Osaka. In Osaka, a case was waiting. A black flight case for stage equipment, large enough for a man to fold into, holes drilled in the side so he could breathe. Private jets leaving Kansai International Airport were exempt, under the rules then in force. From the oversized item screening that applied to commercial flights, no X-ray. Ghosn climbed inside. The case was sealed, wheeled across the tarmac, loaded into the hold. The jet took off for Istanbul, where the case was transferred to a second jet bound for Beirut. He entered Lebanon on a French passport. Lebanon has no extradition treaty with Japan. On December 31st, he announced he was there. His entire $14 million in bail was forfeited the moment he failed to appear. Interpol issued a red notice. And on January 8th, 2020, in a packed room in Beirut, Ghosn told the world he had fled a rigged system and a trial he could never have won. The question the world wanted answered was guilty or framed. The Kelly trial would deliver something closer to an answer than either side wanted. Greg Kelly is from Tennessee, a lawyer who had risen to executive vice president at Nissan. He was arrested in the same November operation as Ghosn for his alleged role in concealing Ghosn's pay. Unlike his boss, he stayed and faced trial. It ran 17 months, effectively a proxy trial for the man who had fled. In March 2022, the Tokyo District Court acquitted Kelly on 7 of the 8 years charged, guilty on 1, a 6-month suspended sentence. In February 2025, the Tokyo High Court upheld that single count and rejected both Kelly's appeal and the prosecutor's bid to overturn the 7 acquittals. A Supreme Court appeal was announced. What the trial judge found mattered more than the headline. He accepted that Kelly's intent had not been to defraud Nissan, but to build a package to retain Ghosn, and most of the concealed amount the court attributed not to Kelly, but to Toshiaki Onuma, the Nissan official who handled the compensation paperwork. Onuma was the prosecution's key witness. He was never put on trial. He had cooperated. In the same window, the man who had ordered the investigation was swept up in it. The probe found falsified documents that had inflated Saikawa's own 2013 pay. The board put the improper extra compensation at around 47 million yen. He resigned in September 2019. He was never indicted. The payments, the board concluded, were not illegal, only manipulated. The same kind of paperwork that had taken down his mentor, and yet the outcomes were not parallel. The Taylors were arrested in Massachusetts, fought extradition, lost, and were sent to Japan. In July 2021, they were sentenced for harboring a criminal, Michael to 2 years, Peter to 1 year and 8 months, against a maximum of 3. The sentencing judge, Hideo Nirei, said the escape had made it virtually impossible to try Ghosn. The Taylors had been paid, the prosecution said, roughly $1.3 million. The court found the motive was money. The day before the Beirut press conference, Tokyo prosecutors issued an arrest warrant for Ghosn's wife, Carol, alleging perjury in testimony she had given about money transfers tied to the charges. She holds a U.S. passport. Unlike her husband, in principle exposed to extradition. She has never been arrested, never tried, never convicted. The family called the timing pathetic. In September 2019, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission settled with Nissan, Ghosn, and Kelly over more than $140 million in compensation it alleged had been concealed from investors. Ghosn paid $1 million and accepted a 10-year ban from any U.S.-listed board. Like nearly all SEC settlements, it was reached without admitting or denying the charges, neither a conviction nor a finding of guilt. And then there is the company, the one he saved in 1999. In December 2024, Nissan and Honda signed a memorandum to merge, combined the world's third-largest automaker, a deal valued at roughly $60 billion. By February 2025, the talks had collapsed. Honda had proposed making Nissan a subsidiary rather than an equal. Nissan refused. The deal died. Then the numbers came in. For the fiscal year ending March 2025, Nissan reported a net loss of approximately 671 billion yen, about $4.5 billion. The second worst result in its history. The worst, by a margin of just 13 billion yen, was 1999, 684 billion. The year Carlos Ghosn arrived to save the company. The two figures, 26 years apart, sit almost on top of one another. Moody's cut Nissan to junk. Shares fell 40% in a year. The company announced a 15% cut to its global workforce, roughly 20,000 jobs. For the fiscal year ending March 2026, announced on May 14th, Nissan posted a fresh net loss of around 533 billion yen, $3.6 billion. A second straight year in the red on its own filings blamed on U.S. tariffs and restructuring. The historic Optima plant, which had built Nissans for more than 60 years, was closed. 7 sites were consolidated. The Yokohama headquarters of the glass tower that for 2 decades had been the public face of the alliance was sold. From Beirut, Ghosn had argued for years that his ouster was a coup and that the men who removed him would run the company into the ground without him. That is his claim. Allegedly, the channel does not endorse it, but the Optima gates are locked. The headquarters has a new owner and 20,000 workers, line operators, engineers, office staff who had stayed through the long gone years are gone. Carlos Ghosn has never stood trial. The red notice is still active. He remains in Beirut on 3 passports in a country that will not send him back. By Judge Nuray's own words, the criminal case will never be heard. Whether he stole from Nissan or whether Nissan staged a coup against him has no courtroom answer. It has only the numbers. And the numbers 6 years on say the company that fired the man who saved it has lost roughly $8 billion in 2 years and shut the plant where its post-war comeback began. Guilty or framed? Pick one. The answer in a Japanese court was never delivered. The answer in Yokohama is delivered every quarter. So here's the question. Was Carlos Ghosn a corporate criminal who escaped justice, or also the victim of the largest boardroom coup in modern industrial history? Tell us in the comments. Because if one man in a box is the strangest exit a chief executive ever made from his own company, wait until you see the founder who was removed from his own boardroom in a single afternoon. That story is coming. Subscribe to Exposed Empire.